Welcome boys and girls, Costini here with my campaign analysis for Emperor Karl Franz in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Karl Franz has a fairly interesting campaign, far more so than either Elspeth or Gelt do. Certainly, Elspeth and Gelt do have a huge amount of campaign power, but I do think that Karl Franz overall does have the best campaign available for the Empire at the moment. At least given the current state of Warhammer 3, which is certainly focused on the early game as opposed to long-term plays, given various situations, the AI situation, the lack of an endgame, so on and so forth. But anyway, with Karl Franz, you start with a tier 1 Altdorf settlement with the barracks. You can take Grunberg after defeating a very small army, and you can get Altdorf to tier 2 within 2 turns. And then that's where the fun really kicks in. You start with a decent enough army, handgunners, Karberg greatswords, mortars, spearmen with shields that you can get on turn 1. And you also start with Helmgard, where you can recruit another lord. So you can get a lord on turn 1 from Altdorf, you can get another one from Helmgard. And in particular, if you get a lord from Helmgard, you can then attack Ubersreich on turn 2 before this army is able to move there. So that's just going to improve the speed at which you're expanding as Karl Franz. So if we start moving everyone over here, like so. So just force march people. We can now attack, just go get that victory, take the settlement. Get another barracks, sure. Though in this case, I suppose, I guess I will just delete the one in Altdorf. Like, I kept it for one turn because I didn't know if necessarily I'd get one in Ubersreich. Like, you don't want to hold a barracks because you don't want those spearmen with shields as line holders. You could rely on just basic spearmen, but here's where things start getting crazy in a Karl Franz campaign. So, one of the things that Karl Franz does have is electoral machinations. Now, there's all kinds of benefits over here, like call to arms, giving you local recruitment capacity, commendation, army experience, inquisition, reducing corruption, conscription, instantly completing one turn of local and global recruitment, so you can recruit things very quickly, spawn a degrading army for another Imperial faction. So not for yourself, but for another Imperial faction. So one of the things you want to do in Karl's campaign is actually keep the Elector counts alive. Part of the reason is because of the Imperial authority, but Imperial authority is not justification enough. But the real reason you want to keep them alive is to do with Unify. So Karl Franz, unlike Elspeth and Gelt, has the guarantee of a confederation available in his campaign. And not just with the Elector counts. Once you upgrade this, you can do it with any Imperial factions. You can do it with Volkmar, you can do it with Marcus Wolfhard, you can do it with Gelt, even though they're not Elector counts in the Empire at the beginning of a campaign, or they're not in general. You can be, but the downside is if you can't just declare war on another Elector count without losing fealty. So Karl is not, so unlike vast majority of other campaigns where, sure, you might confederate with diplomacy, but if you really want territory of minor factions, you could just declare war on them. Karl Franz has an incentive to not do that. His incentive is to keep these Elector counts alive and then unify to confederate them, while trying to maintain the fealty of all factions. Like, it's very easy, for instance, to get unification with Talabheim, and there's various ways to get unification with other factions as well. But you look at Talabheim, it starts as a tier 2 settlement. By the time you realistically can unify with them, they'll probably have a tier 3 Talabheim and an entire province available for you. And an entire stack, dependent on the difficulty that you're playing on. And then all Elector count state troopers, so the special troops of the Empire, will become available for the sake of recruitment. On top of that, but the real kicker is Open the Gates. So Open the Gates gives you 1 population surplus, you can upgrade it to 2, in a particular province. So, for instance, over here, I'm already getting Altdorf to tier 2. Now let's get Uberstreik to tier 2. And you can see here that it's only going to take one turn. That is where another crazy aspect about the Empire comes in. Because it's one thing to get growth, but what about instant construction? Ah yes, that is where the insanity of Karl Franz's campaign really kicks in. Now you may want to use the load save character system for this, but lords and heroes can get one trait, the noble trait. This gives you a 10% income from buildings in a region, but crucially it gives you 25% construction time for all buildings in a region as well. So if you're playing a Karl Franz campaign, you can get this effect from turn 1 by using load save character system. You just need to recruit a character in Altdorf, move them into this into the river over there, and then move them back in the settlement. You can do that, and you'll get the effect in Altdorf. So you can get Altdorf to tier 2 very quickly, and then you can start talking about other settlements as well. And it's only a 3-turn cooldown, and only 500 prestige. You gain prestige from battles. What this realistically means is that if you're playing a Karl Franz campaign, you can get Altdorf to tier 5 very, very quickly. Now, the chief problem on this, by the way, is going to be money. So you're likely going to run out of money if you push it too hard. There is some bullshit you can do. Now, for my part, I do prefer getting to tier 5 very quickly. The reason I do prefer getting to tier 5 quickly is just for the sake of unit diversity. So getting things like land ships and steam tanks, Luminarchs. Yes, Luminarchs are actually a good unit right now. Is worth it. But really, if you're playing Karl Franz, the one thing you actually want, more so than other things, is to get to tier 3 very quickly. Because that's where a lot of the good stuff is. So you get Knights of the Blazing Sun, and you get Great Swords. You get Hochland long rifles and iron sights, and you get enough buildings over here to make it work. But tier 5 is a luxury. You can do it with a bunch of nobles. I would say you need like 4 nobles. Like, yeah, you do need 4 nobles to really maximize that construction benefit, and you'll be moving them from one region or another in the Reichland. But being able to get to that high tier very quickly is a fairly substantial advantage in this campaign, and it's something only Karl Franz can do. Beyond that, Karl Franz also has the Electrocount system to work with. The downside of the system is that you can't get Electrocount state troopers in the same way that Elspeth or Gelt can, because they just pay money for research and unlock these units, whereas Karl Franz, you do need to own the various capitals of the Electrocounts in order to get access to these units. Some of these are powerful, some of these not so much. But you also get items, the Rune Fangs, or other things like the Letter, for instance. And you also get the trait for the Lord that is the Electrocount of a particular province. So Electrocount of Talabayam gives you timber, flaming attacks, income from timber, all provinces, and all Electrocounts do give you an upkeep benefit for Electrocount state troopers, because otherwise they end up being more expensive than regular soldiers, but you can certainly decrease that by quite a bit. Karl himself has a bunch of benefits as well. The ability of getting Lord Recruit rank, faction-wide, unit experience rank +2, unit experience 20% for his army, various benefits for state troopers, Reichsguard, infantry, growth in the province, control in the local province, as well as the Leader of Men skill, which increases the Electrocount state troop pool capacity +1. That is a pretty nice benefit to work with over there. And yes, he can summon the Electrocounts every 35 turns. So you're realistically only going to use this once in a campaign if you're even going to use it at all. It's just a meme of an ability, really, more so than anything else. He does have free quest battles and the Gotrek and Felix quest battle, so you can gain a good amount of money through those quest battles. He also can replenish in neutral territory, has further upkeep benefits for Electrocount state troopers in his own army, and also gives them weapon string missile damage based on experience for those troopers. Faction effect-wise, he's immune to diplomatic penalties, he gains extra allegiance points, and crucially, he gets 5 growth per allied faction. This creates a kind of situation where Karl, having a good amount of allies in his campaign, is going to buff up his campaign by quite a bit. Though, of course, you do have to work for it. It does feel very appropriate for Karl Franz, who, in the lore, he's this amazing statesman in the Warhammer universe, or one of the best emperors that they've had, with other people like, of course, Sigmar and Magnus. Like, there's many emperors in the history of the Empire that weren't really great, whereas Karl Franz certainly is one of the better statesmen that they've had leading the Empire. But he does have his hands full. So you've got Kemmler over here, who's going to threaten Marienburg. You do have Grom. Hell, you even have Orion to contend with. Then you start at war with Kazrak, you have Festus, you have Vlad. And the defining feature of this campaign is how you decide to deal with various issues. Like, who do you go after? How do you go after them? Like, one of the things you can do in this campaign quickly is secure the Reichland and then try and deal with Kazrak and Festus. Or you can try and deal with Kemmler, or you can go into Bretonia through Helmgart instead of going through Marienburg. You can go through to Montfort, take it out, go after Grom, or go after Paravan. There are a significant number of choices available in this campaign, and that is what makes this campaign so great. The kind of strategic flexibility that a lot of campaigns do lack from the very beginning of it. If there is a downside, and there is certainly, is the fact that the campaign is very interesting early on, but as you play more and more through it, it certainly doesn't have the kind of, say, long-term staying power that other campaigns do have. One issue on the subject is actually related to climate. So you do have temperate, desert, jungle. That does include a good portion of the map, but it doesn't include the wasteland, so not the Badlands. It doesn't include any of the mountains that surround the Empire. And what that means realistically is you do end up having a good situation with the Empire in itself, but then you have severe limitations outside of it. At least to the north and west, and even east. Instead, you kind of like take over the Empire, then your best bet if you're playing that long game is going south. But then you have a multitude of threats to deal with coming from the north. Unless Kislev does manage to stop them dead in their tracks. And Kislev can do so, but it depends on, how things shape up with regards to that. One issue I would dare say does exist in this campaign, and actually all Imperial campaigns, is how Imperial authority works. You generally want to get 100 Imperial authority, but what's silly about this, as far as I see it, is that it makes sense if it's a race that wouldn't be friendly with the Empire. So greenskins, chaos, yeah, that makes sense. But having to take, a forest over here, or if Kislev takes some territory, and even if you're allied with them, having to kick them out and declare war on factions that would naturally be your allies is not the greatest campaign dynamic in the world. But that does apply to Gelt and Elspeth, I would dare say. So that is the principal downside. It's like that long-term potential. Before what it's worth, the early game is very flexible, very strategic, very interesting. You can cheese, you can abuse things, or you can play it naturally. And I think like this campaign will provide you a very interesting and dynamic start to work with. This is one of the reasons why I recommend this campaign for a lot of people, because it does present those choices, and how you tackle those choices, I think, is going to make you a better player. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications.